Hello everyone. This week I've been trying out a new foundation from Victoria Beckham. So this is called the Foundation Drops, and this is in collaboration with Augustinus Bader. And it has some of the Augustinus Bader proprietary peptide in it, which is called TFC8 or oligopeptide 177. And so I wanted to give this a try to see what kind of a foundation it was and whether or not it seemed to make a difference on my skin in terms of it having that proprietary peptide in it. So last year I did do an experiment, and on half of my face I used the Augustinus Bader Rich Cream, and half of my face I did not, and I just used all of my other skincare the same on both sides. And then at the end of the year I compared and I did a video on this, and I kind of came to the conclusion that I did see a difference and that I do think that it had been helpful for me. And there were a lot of other people that seemed to think that it did make a difference, and so if you're interested, you can go and take a look at that video. But in any case, I guess I have become somewhat of a fan of Augustinus Bader products, and therefore that did make me interested in trying out this foundation. And so this is a non-silicone foundation, and I have found it to be somewhat similar in texture to some of the other non-silicone foundations that I have tried that have been more moisturizing, and that in some cases that I do like for my mature and dry skin. And so one of those is the foundation that is from Patrick Ta, and that is a foundation that I tried out last year and that I did really like, and that has become one of my favorite foundations. And so for this video footage I will demonstrate the Victoria Beckham foundation on its own, and then I also will be doing a side-by-side comparison with that Patrick Ta foundation so that we can see whether or not we think one of those does better than the other in terms of how it looks on my skin. And then in addition, there are a few other products from Victoria Beckham that I thought I would bring up in this video. So one of these is called the Cell Rejuvenating Illuminator, and so this is a glowy highlighter that is like a liquid, and so you can either use this on your face just to give a little bit of glow, or you can use it as a primer or on top of makeup. And so I've been playing with this one for a while. It was released a few months ago, and so I tried this out in concert with the foundation drops to see how well they work together. And then in addition, I have a bunch of other products from Victoria Beckham that I'm going to go back and demonstrate and talk about in terms of how I'm feeling about them at this point in time. And so first, a little bit of information about me. I am 61 years old, and I have dry and very sensitive skin, and I've never had any kind of cosmetic procedures like injections or surgery or even lasers. And so I am hoping that the makeup and the skincare products that I use can help me to look a little bit fresher and maybe even a little bit younger without causing irritation to my skin. And one thing that I have found is that there are certain ingredients that always do irritate my very sensitive skin, and I know that those ingredients tend to be very irritating for other people as well, and so I just don't talk about products with those ingredients on this channel. Before we get started, I wanted to mention my Facebook group, and that is called 40 Plus Beauty with Lisa Petrison. And so the goal of the group is to talk about all things related to maintaining a happy and healthy appearance as we get older. And so if you are interested, then I hope you will join us in the group. And so let's talk a little bit about Augustinus Bader. So he is a professor in Germany, and he is a stem cell researcher. And so he's a medical doctor as well as a researcher. And he has been interested in recent years in the idea of helping burn victims, most of whom are in third world countries and are burned as a result of cooking fires. And so what he said is that he developed a proprietary peptide that could be used in a cream and that would help burn victims to recover more easily and without the need for things like skin grafts. And he wanted to get this to be approved, but it turns out that getting a drug approved for medical use is very, very expensive. And so he had a hard time raising the money for that because most burn victims are in poor countries, and therefore there's not a lot of money to be made on these people. And so eventually he ended up meeting an investment banker named Charles Rosier, And the conversation turned to whether or not he could create a anti-wrinkle cream. And he said, well, why would I want to do that? And the idea eventually became that maybe if they sold enough anti-wrinkle cream that this could finance some of this burn research. And so he developed a product that was, I don't know how similar it was to the original burn cream, but it was released into the market in 2018, and it became very popular very fast with a lot of celebrities, and they would talk about it with one another, and it ended up being pretty successful. And so now it is sold at Sephora and at Blue Mercury, and a lot of people have tried it, and some people have reported good things about it. And I became especially interested in this when Bobbi Brown joined their company in terms of being a creative advisor for them. And so my feeling was that I had a lot of respect for her and I liked the products that her company created, and so therefore it might be worthwhile giving this particular product a try as well. And so soon after the company launched, Victoria Beckham became interested in doing a collaboration with them with regard to her new makeup company. And so she introduced a couple new products to begin with. She introduced a primer and a serum. And then more recently, she introduced a couple of makeup products. So first of all, they started out with a concealer, which I've talked about in a previous video. And now they have these foundation drops. And so the new foundation is called the Foundation Drops with TFC8. And TFC8 is trigger factor complex. And so the idea with this is that it includes a peptide that is designed to encourage your own stem cells in your skin to perform better and to know how to regenerate your skin. So it actually doesn't include any stem cells in the product, but rather it is a peptide that is helping your own skin cells to work better. And it is supposed to have luminous light coverage, and they say that it should be breathable and serum light and has a buildable natural feel finish. And they say that it is supposed to last for 12 hours on the skin and that it should be undetectable and have a natural finish to it, and that the coverage that you can get from it is light to medium, or buildable to medium apparently. And they say our breathable matrix of suspended pigments diffuses imperfections while allowing natural skin to shine through. And so what they are claiming is that there should be an improvement in skin moisture after 12 hours of wear, and after 6 weeks of use, you should see an improvement in skin elasticity and fine lines and wrinkles. And in terms of the ingredients, again, this is not a silicone foundation, and it is really an oil-based foundation, so it has a lot of processed oil derivatives in it, including derivatives from olive oil, coconut oil, and shea butter. And it has glycerin and pentyl glycol, which are humectants. And then it also has squalene and jojoba oil. And then it has 2 different kinds of peptides. So it has the oligopeptide 177, which is the Augustinus Bader one. And then another peptide that is called oligopeptide 4, which again is supposed to be anti-wrinkling and skin conditioning. And then it also has prickly pear extract, which is supposed to be anti-aging, and Sisymbrium erioseed oil, which is supposed to be anti-puffing. And that, I think, is in almost all of the Augustinus Bader products. And then there are a few other botanical type ingredients that are supposed to have skincare benefits to them, including echinacea and electric daisy and olive leaf extract. And then it has some mica in it for a little bit of a shimmer. And they are instructing that you can either put this on with your fingers or with a brush, and so I have just used my fingers for this. And what they say is dispense a few drops to apply as you see fit onto fingertips, back of the hand, directly onto face or an artist's palette. Use your fingertips or a brush to build coverage and blend, build and add additional concentrated coverage wherever you desire. And they have a new brush that is called the number 10 flat complexion brush, which is supposed to be a paddle-shaped brush that they are encouraging people to use with this particular foundation. I haven't actually tried any of the Victoria Beckham brushes yet, but I would be interested in that. I don't feel like this foundation is necessary to use with a brush, though. I think that I have done fine with just my fingers, and then I didn't really feel like I needed to use a brush with this except to buff it into my skin a little bit, which is what I almost always do with foundations. So in terms of my own observations, I do think that this is somewhat typical of the foundations that I have used that are more moisturizing foundations and that do not have any silicones in them. So I do think that you should be considering this in comparison to foundations that don't have silicones in them. If you try to compare that to a foundation that does have silicones in it, then I think that you're going to think that this is really surprising in terms of how it performs, because it's not going to perform the same way. And I do think that this provides fairly light coverage, and that to the extent that I am putting on the amount of foundation that I feel comfortable with, that doesn't feel too heavy and greasy, that really what I'm getting is a pretty light foundation. So I think it's a little bit blurring, and it provides a little bit of evening to my skin color, but in general I'm really not getting a lot of coverage from this foundation. And I do think it's important to know that this is a foundation that I don't think can be expected to dry down. And so therefore, if I am just using it on its own and I don't put any powder or setting spray on it, I would find this one to be very frustrating, because it would continue to feel wet, and I do feel like it would not set in place and stay very well on my skin. And so personally, in order to make this work in a way that I feel comfortable with, I did put both setting spray, the Makeup by Mario setting spray, and some powder down on top of it. And the powders that I used are ones that are more oil absorbing, and so I'll talk about that. But in general, I don't personally feel like, even though I have dry skin, that this is a foundation that I would use on its own without trying to set it. Now, it may be that when we get to winter and my skin is much, much more dry, then my skin will be a little bit happier with this, and I will be really grateful for the amount of moisture that it does have in it. But I still think, based on my experience with other foundations that don't have any kind of setting potential and that are really high in oils, that probably even in the winter I'm going to have to be using a setting spray and or a setting powder with it. And personally, I really prefer in a foundation a product that is giving me a really natural look. And so if we get to a foundation that looks really glowy, then that is not something I feel all that comfortable with. And so I do think that this has some of that mica in it, and so that does make it a little bit shimmery, and more shimmery than I would prefer in a foundation. But I do feel like if I use powder on top of it, that takes care of that shimmer pretty easily. So when it comes to foundations that have a lot of oil in them and that are really moisturizing, that is when I tend to get out powders that are more on the oil-absorbing side. And so one of the ones that I like the most is from Jones Road. And so this is called the Tinted Face Powder. And I think that this one is really designed to work with the foundation, which is another one of those foundations that has a whole lot of oil in it. And so this one has a good bit of cornstarch in it, and I do like this particular product a lot. And then also, more recently, I purchased this one from Polite Society, and this one is a really pretty powder. It is very finely milled, and I do think it looks very pretty on my skin, but it is really, really oil absorbing. And so if I put this just on my regular skin, then it makes it really, really dried out. But if I use it on top of a foundation like this one, then I feel like even if I just use a very, very small amount of this product, that it will absorb all that oil really quickly, and that it will hold up much better. And unlike many of the powders on the market that are oil absorbing, neither of these have talc in them, and so I feel a little bit better about that. The other powder that I've had some good experiences with is the Makeup by Mario loose powder. I think that one's been pretty good. And recently I've heard some good things about the About Face powder, and so I'm looking forward to trying that one pretty soon also. But I do think that with this foundation, if you just put down this foundation and then you just use a little bit of whatever kind of regular powder, like the Kosas powder or whatever, I do think that you may be frustrated with that because this does have an awfully lot of oil in it. And then one thing that is really important to me when I'm wearing any kind of foundation is whether or not it is exacerbating the texture on my skin. So I definitely don't want my wrinkles to be looking worse, and I don't want it to make it look like I have pore situation or other kinds of issues that make me actually look older rather than better. And in this particular case, I think it turned out to be okay. I don't feel like it exacerbated the look of the wrinkles or the other texture on my face. And I do feel like once I got it dried down, it looked quite natural and it made it hard to tell that I was wearing foundation at all. And so that is certainly always what I am looking for. And if I compare it to a few other foundations that I have tried, I think that there are a few foundations that are out there that I do really, really like because I feel like they not only don't exacerbate the look of my wrinkles, but that they actually provide a little bit of plumping to my skin, and therefore that they make me look like I'm a little bit fresher and not quite as gaunt, because when you get to be over 50, you do start to lose some fat volume. So when I'm comparing this to foundations like that, I'm thinking of ones like the Jones Road What the Foundation, or the Patrick Ta Foundation, or the original Makeup by Mario Surreal Skin Foundation. And I do think that all of those have worked well on my skin in terms of how they have made me look, and I actually do feel like when I wear those foundations that I do look a bit younger. I don't know that this foundation did this as much. I don't think that it has that sort of plumping feeling to it, but I do feel like I look pretty good with this on and not at least older than I do when I'm not wearing any foundation at all. But again, I do feel like it's really important for me to take the shine down, because if it's really shiny like that, I think one of the reasons that I don't like that is not just because it doesn't look natural, but also because when things are shiny like that, it does seem to exacerbate texture in a lot of cases. And so when I did take that shine down with some powder, I think it looked a lot better on me. And in terms of how my skin did with this, I think that my skin actually does like this product quite a bit. I have not had any problems with irritation, and my skin certainly does feel hydrated with it, and I think that I would be happy to wear this in terms of how it feels on my skin. It is a little bit of trouble to put on because I have to put on the setting spray and the powder with it, and so that's a multi-step process. But in terms of how it feels on my skin, I do like that, and I have some hopes that if I wear this foundation on a regular basis, that my skin might actually improve, because it does have those proprietary peptides in it. And so I think that it's a little bit on the heavy side for where we are right now, because right now it is still so hot outside where I'm living that I am having to run the air conditioning, and so my skin is not dried out at all yet. And so I think that it may be that in a month or two, when it starts to get a lot colder outside and the air becomes a lot drier, that I might really welcome this foundation more. I would never wear that Patrick Ta foundation in the summertime months, and I would never wear either the Makeup by Mario one or the Jones Road one in the summertime months. And so I am looking forward to moving into winter in terms of wearing this foundation. Maybe I will try it on a regular basis, like every day for a couple weeks, and see if it seems to be the case that it's actually improving my skin quality, because I think that that's possible. But in any case, I think that my skin does like this foundation fine, just as much as any other foundation that I've ever tried, actually. And I do appreciate the fact that it doesn't have silicone in it, because when I go out and I walk my dog, for instance, although it does get a little bit more moist, it doesn't feel like I am sweating underneath the foundation and that my skin is not able to breathe. So I do appreciate that about it. So in terms of comparisons, I would mostly be comparing this to other skin tints, and I think that Really, it's a real mistake to even think about comparing this to silicone-based skin tints. So if you talk about whether or not you like it better than the Lisa Eldridge or the Chantecaille or the Dolce & Gabbana that I reviewed in one of my other recent videos. And I also like, for instance, the Kylie skin tint. But in any case, there's an awfully lot of skin tints on the market that do have silicones in them. And so if you're looking for a silicone-based foundation, then that's great. But if you're not looking for a silicone-based foundation, this is going to be very, very different. And so I don't think that's a very good comparison. With regard to the non-silicone skin tints that I have liked, again, I think that the Patrick Ta one is very similar to that one, and that's why I decided to compare it in this video footage. I think that the Westman Atelier one is one that people have brought up, and my feeling about that one was that it is definitely making my wrinkles look worse. That was really one of the first skin tints that came out on the market that didn't have silicones in it that was supposed to perform pretty well. But I feel like that one's getting to be kind of on the old-fashioned side now, and I would never personally wear that one, and I don't feel like my skin even liked that one that much. And I also really like both the Hourglass Skin Tint and the Jones Road Skin Tint, and those are foundations that I do wear. But I think that those are quite a bit different than this one, so I think that those two perform a lot more like a silicone skin tint, and that they dry down pretty easily, and they are pretty flexible, and I don't feel like I need to powder them. And this one, I definitely feel like it has a lot of oil in it, and that I do need to be powdering that one. And I think that the Jones Road What the Foundation, that one is a little bit like this, except that that one is definitely thicker and a bit more stickier. And then that one also has essential oils in it, and those essential oils are ones that do irritate my skin, so I haven't really been wearing that one. And there's also a couple of serum foundations that have little pigment balls in them, like the Chanel one and the Jane Iredale one and the Rose Incorporated one, and I think that those are very different from this one also. And I do feel like this has held up surprisingly well for me, even when I went out and, for instance, walked my dog for an hour outside. I think that it has been not too bad. I'm not really expecting a foundation that is not a silicone foundation, or not a foundation that's performing like a silicone foundation, to last all that well. But I think that once I had this set and I used the setting spray on it, I do feel like it's a foundation that I can reasonably expect to hold up pretty well for the entire day. And in terms of the shades, there are 19 shades, and I would say that compared to many foundations that are on the market, there is a higher percentage of these that are for darker skin tones and a smaller percentage that are for lighter skin tones. And there really aren't that many shades in general, and so I would say that means that if you have a darker skin tone, then you may be especially likely to get a good match out of this foundation, but that if you have a lighter skin tone, then that may end up being an issue. And so, for instance, I do know that Not Fit for Print Beauty, Rebecca, she says that she always has a neutral skin tone, and therefore she tries to make sure she at least gets the right undertone, but that when she did with this particular line, that she chose shade number 4, which is light with neutral undertones, and shade number 7, which is light medium with neutral undertones. And she said there was a very large gap between these two different shades, and when she talked to them, they suggested that she use shade 5, which is light with neutral warm undertones. So maybe eventually you may be able to find a shade for you. I don't know if that one has worked out for her. But in general, I think that it's not going to be necessarily straightforward in terms of figuring out what shade to get, and I think that some people may find that they don't get as good of a match as they would like. And personally, I chose shade number 2, which is Fair Light with neutral cool undertones. I was not really sure at all, based on the information on the website, which shade would be best for me. I don't think that they even have any good pictures of all of the shades swatched, but I think that the shade that I chose has been fine for me. And Victoria Beckham does have a good reputation for taking things back and for having pretty good customer service. And so if you don't end up with a good shade for you, then hopefully they can help you out with that. But I also think that it might be a good idea to send a picture of yourself in natural light to them so that they can help you to pick out a shade that might be right for you. Because $110 is an awful lot of money to get a product that does not work for you. And now let's talk about the other product that I have been trying out that is from Victoria Beckham and Augustinus Bader. And this one is called the Cell Rejuvenating Illuminator. And so I have the smaller size of this, which cost $80, and it is for 20 milliliters, so it's 2/3 of an ounce. And then there's also a larger size for $150, and that is for 50 milliliters, or about an ounce and a half. And there are 3 shades of this. And so the first one is called Pearlescent, which is supposed to be Universal Light Reflecting Natural Glow, Rose, which is Universal Rosy Glow Pink, and Golden, which is Universal Warm Browns Glow. And so I decided to choose the rose shade, and the reason for that is, first of all, I thought it would be more fun, and then also I do feel like I've had a lot of luck with pink powders, and that I feel like if I use a pink powder, it sort of makes me look like I have a little bit more of a flush to my cheeks, and that it looks like I have a little bit more blood flow, and so I've kind of liked that, and so I thought that this pink shade might be kind of nice. And I guess I feel like I was a little bit disappointed by this pink color. I do feel like when I put it all over my face that it less looks like I have a healthy blood flow to my skin, and it more looks like my skin is a little bit on the reddish side. And so when you look at the footage, you can take a look at it and see what you think. But in general, I think that if I were going to do it again, I would have gotten just the plain pearlescent shade. I think that that one might have been a little bit safer. Now, what I do feel like this works a little bit better for is if I use it over my foundation, or just a little bit of it to give myself a little bit of hydration on my face. And in that case, the pink on it looks a little bit like I'm wearing blush almost, and I think that that is kind of attractive. And so they are suggesting that this particular product can be used in several different ways. So first of all, you can use it more like a primer, which is what I did in the video footage, and you also can use it just on its own on your face to give your face a little bit of glow and a little bit of hydration, even if you're not wearing foundation. And then they suggest that you can put a little bit of it on top of your makeup as a highlight, and that you could use it as a refresh and rehydrate by pressing into the skin later during the day. And then they also say that you could mix it into the foundation to give the foundation a little bit more. Sodium hyaluronate is the main ingredient in this, in addition to, for instance, the peptides. So you can mix it into a foundation and it will change the texture of a foundation a little bit, maybe for the better, and also provide a little bit of glow. And they are claiming that this is supposed to be visibly blurring and refreshing. And the main ingredients in this include glycerin and squalane and a fermented ingredient. And then there's also ectoin, niacinamide, and several different kinds of sodium hyaluronate, and then the oligopeptide 177. And so my guess here is that the product that they are mostly being inspired by is the one that is from Dr. Barbara Sturm. And so she has a product that is called Glow Drops, and these are also quite expensive. I think they're about the same ballpark in terms of how expensive they are. And I think those are just available in one shade still. But a lot of people do use those either when they're not wearing any makeup at all, or on top of other makeup that they might be wearing. And I think that that may be Dr. Barbara Sturm's most popular product, other than just their straight hyaluronic acid serum. And I have used that one, and I do like it. And if I were going to choose between this Augustinus Bader product and the Dr. Barbara Sturm one, I think that both of those are very nice, but I am a fan of this proprietary peptide in the Augustinus Bader product, and so that does make me kind of like this one. And I do feel like if I'm using this one just as a touch-up and to add a little bit of highlighting to the upper part of my face, that it does look really pretty. And I felt that same thing about the Dr. Barbara Sturm product. Now, what I will say is that both of these are very, very expensive, and that the reason that they're so expensive is because of the skincare ingredients in them. And so I certainly don't think that if you were wearing a silicone foundation or anything like that, that you would probably want to be using these products, because it's kind of a waste, and you could be using any kind of highlighting type of a product and it would probably be giving you a similar look. And I think that the real advantage to this is that it is a blend of skincare and also cosmetics. And so therefore, if you're going to be putting it on over a foundation, you want it to be over a foundation that's not providing that tight layer that won't allow any of the skincare actives to get through. So one thing that we do not know about any of the Augustinus Bader products is how much of that proprietary peptide they put in the products. So my guess would be that the skincare products have more of that ingredient in them, and that maybe the serum from the skincare ingredient, that one is particularly expensive, so maybe it has a lot of that proprietary peptide in it. But they are not even saying that. They're not even suggesting how much each product has in it. And so I wouldn't think that the foundation would have as much of this in it as, for instance, the Rich Cream, but it's really hard to know because they're not providing any information at all. But one thing that I will say is that now that I have these products, I do feel a little bit obliged to use them up, because I don't want them to go to waste, and I feel like it's not just that I'm looking good in the short term when I wear these products, but that they're also supposed to be good for the skin, and that it would be unfortunate not to finish them off. And so now I do feel like I am going to be wanting to use foundation on a more regular basis over the winter as I experiment with this product and do try to get some use out of it. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe being in that kind of a mindset, maybe I'll look better. So it'll be an interesting experiment. So in the first video footage, I am using the Victoria Beckham foundation drops on both halves of my face, but on one half of my face, I also am using the Cell Rejuvenating Illuminator. So I wanted to see if there was any kind of a difference that we could notice if I did put this on my face in addition to the product. And so again, the Cell Rejuvenating Illuminator is that rose shade, and I personally feel like my skin looks kind of on the reddish side and maybe even slightly irritated in that video, but you can tell me what you think. I do think it looks a little bit more hydrated in that video footage right after I put it on, but I think that it also does look like it might be a little irritated, which actually is not the case. And then on that same side of the face, I am using the Victoria Beckham foundation drops, and again, this is shade 2. And I do feel like that toned down that reddish pink color a little bit, and it looks a little bit more even, just slightly more even. Again, this is not providing very much coverage, and so I think that it looks nice, but I don't feel like it looks like I have much coverage at all. And I do think that it looks more wet and sort of glowy in person than it ended up looking on the video footage, so that is kind of important to know. And then I'm using a little bit of my favorite setting spray, and so this came out last year, and this is called the Makeup by Mario Surreal Skin Setting Spray, and this does not have any fragrance in it or any kind of a scent at all, and I think that my skin really likes this quite a bit. It will provide just a little bit of a tacky type feeling on my skin, but I don't think it feels unnatural, and I don't think it feels has any kind of irritation for my skin at all. And in general, I do find that when I'm using a foundation that is oilier and glowier, that this one does set it into place very nicely and that it holds up pretty well. And then I am putting on a little bit of the Jones Road powder, and this is called the Tinted Face Powder, and I have a number of different shades of this, but the one that I'm using here is just the shade that is called Light, and so this is sort of the color of my skin. A lot of times I will use the pink version of that, which I also like, and this is quite oil absorbing, and so therefore if I have a foundation that really needs to have the moisture taken down a little bit, then this is a good product that I can use just a very, very small amount right on the areas that really need that powder. And so I have this brush from BK Beauty, and this is called the 108 Precision Powder Brush. And so it's a very small brush, and I can put it right on the areas of my face that really need to have a little bit of powder put down. And in a lot of cases, I will use the pink version of this powder that I have, and I think that that does make it look like I'm a little bit more youthful and have a little bit more blood flow. But I felt like my skin was already looking kind of pink from that primer, and so I just used this regular light shade, which is just a neutral shade. And so at this point, I just have products on one half of my face, and then the other half of my face is totally without any products at all. And I'm not really seeing much of a difference between the two. I think it could be that the side that does have the makeup on it looks a little tiny bit more blurred, and that the age spots or whatever may be a little bit less noticeable. But I really don't feel like this product provides a lot of coverage, and so if that is something that you're looking for, then you're not going to get it from this product. But I do feel like this provides a nice solid base for me to use another product over the top of it. Now, it is the case that Rebecca from Not Fit for Print Beauty did find that the foundations that she used that were not in the right shade actually did look wrong on her, and I think that they looked wrong enough that you could actually tell in the video footage. So maybe it is providing more coverage than I might think, and maybe this is just a particularly good shade match for me. But in any case, I don't feel like it is looking like I'm wearing makeup, and that's actually a good thing. And then on the other side of my face, again, I'm not using the Cell Rejuvenating Illuminator. I'm just putting the foundation right on the top of my skin. And I feel like, again, this looks basically the same on both sides. When I'm finished with that, I think that the side with the primer, it might look slightly more pink. You can tell me what you think. Maybe it even looks slightly more glowy. I wouldn't necessarily agree that it really looks any different, though. I think it really looks very, very similar in terms of those two sides. And I don't feel like it made any difference in terms of how well the foundation held up or how it looked. Now, it might be the case that when we get to winter that my face might welcome the ingredients that are in that primer. And so I do usually use some kind of a skincare, especially in the winter, before I put down any kind of foundation. And so this might be one that I would consider. But so far, I really don't see that there was much difference. And then let's talk about the rest of the makeup that I'm putting on. So I'm starting out with brows, and I do have brows that are very sparse and they are very light, and so it can be difficult for me to get a really appealing and natural looking brow if I don't use exactly the right products. And so Victoria Beckham does have two brow products. So she has a pencil that is called the Baby Blade, and I have that in the shade Taupe. And then she also has a brow gel that is tinted, and this is called the Feather Fix, and I have that in the shade Blonde. And so my feeling about these products is that they're not all that appropriate for my own difficult brows, and that this eyebrow pencil, this is just a kind of a straightforward eyebrow pencil, and that if I use it by itself especially, then it doesn't look like I have a very natural brow at all, and that even if I do my best to try to feather on little sharp little strokes, that it really doesn't look natural. And generally I do put on a brow gel over the top of it, but this particular brow gel, it is much more thin than a lot of the brow gels that I use, and so it does tend to make a little bit of a mess and to get on the skin underneath the hairs, and it doesn't really make the hairs look larger, and so it's a little bit difficult to work with. And it has this odd wand that is not like a swirly brush where the bristles go all around. It more just has bristles on one side of the brush, and so it's a little bit more like a brush that you would use to brush your hair with, and I don't know that that's worked all that well for me either. And so I kind of managed to make it work, but I wouldn't say that my brows look very good, and I haven't gotten that much use out of these products because I feel like there are other products out there that work a lot better for me. And then I thought that I would get out the eyeshadow sticks from Victoria Beckham that I have. So I have a bunch of these, and I have kind of liked them, and the two that I got out for this look were the ones that are more neutral. So there is one that is called Trench, which is almost the same color as my skin, and then there is one that is called Pecan, which is a lot darker and kind of a shading brown color for me. And what I feel like about this Trench shade is that it is one that I can just put directly on my eyelids without having to put down a concealer or any kind of primer. And so that part I do like. And the Pecan one, what I do think is that I didn't blend it quickly enough. So these do blend fairly well when you first put them down, but then if you wait even for a second, then they become much more difficult to blend, and then they will stick to the skin sort of permanently, and you will need to use some kind of an oily makeup remover in order to get them off. And in this case, it looks like I didn't work fast enough, and that especially on one of my eyes that it didn't really get blended in enough at all. And I didn't really realize that when I was just looking at the monitor on my camera. But now that I look at the video footage, I think I could have done a lot better in terms of applying that eyeshadow. But I think that it really is very helpful to do makeup recordings of yourself putting on makeup, even if it's just with an iPhone, and that you can learn an awfully lot from that. And so that is something that I would encourage people to do, possibly, is to just try out putting on your own makeup by recording yourself and see what you think of it based on what you see in the video footage. And then as a topper for this, I got out the lid luster shade that I have, and this is called Velvet, and this is kind of a greenish yellow type of a shade. And I think that this is a really pretty shade on me. I like it a lot. And I think that these lid lusters are kind of nice. At first, when I used them, I thought that they were especially shimmery and that they were kind of special. And I think that as time has gone on and we've seen more shimmery type products like this, I think that these have started to seem a little bit not as good as some of these. I think especially these tend to be just a little bit patchy, and so therefore they do need a little tiny bit of work in order to get them to make a nice look. But I still think that they are very pretty. And I think that just for this video footage, I should have really blended those out more as well. And then two products from Victoria Beckham that I do still like quite a lot include their lip pencils and their Posh lipsticks. And so the lip pencils come in several different neutral type shades, and then they also come in a red lip pencil shade that I like a lot. And I think that these are just about as good as any lip liners that I have, and that they're actually a lot like a lot of the lip liners that have been released recently, like for instance the Westman Atelier lip liners or the Charlotte Tilbury lip liners, and that they are a little bit gummy, and that you can add a nice contour, neutral shade to your lips, and then put the lipstick over it. And I think that it is possible to give yourself a lip that looks a little bit larger and that is really attractive and natural looking. And so the lip definer shade that I have is in shade 3, which has a little bit more rosiness to it. And I do feel like my natural lip color is fairly rosy, so that is a shade that I feel comfortable with. And then in this video footage and today on my lips, I am wearing a color that is called Spark. And so this is kind of a rose color. And I do feel like all of these lipstick shades from Victoria Beckham, at least the ones that I've tried, they've all been kind of muted looking. So I feel like Victoria Beckham herself, that her standard look tends to be a really kind of a dramatic smoky eye even for the day, and then more of a non-accentuated lip that kind of is just more natural looking. And I find that to be an attractive looking lip. And I think that these lipsticks actually are really nice. They're a little bit smaller lipsticks, but they are not super expensive, and I think that they have performed really well for me. And there's no kind of flavor in them, and I do think that they behave really well in terms of sticking to the lips and not tending to get outside the lip line. And they taste good and feel good to me. And they are slightly moisturizing as well. And I have one of Victoria Beckham's blush sticks, which are called Cheeky Posh. And so the shade that I have is called Terracotta. and it is just a little bit like a neutral type of a color that I think looks really natural on me. And I really like these blush sticks actually quite a bit, and I think that compared to many of the blush sticks that I have, these do last for quite a while on my cheeks. And so when I put them on, I do feel fairly confident that my blush is not going to disappear really quickly. And so that does seem to be really important to me. And at least with this particular shade, it is not overdone and it's not too bright, and so I feel like it goes on really easily, and then all I have to do is just blend it in with my fingers or with a stiff brush, and it looks quite natural on me. So I'm very happy with this, and I'm not sure why I've never purchased another shade of this blush, and now that I'm looking at it, it's not even all that expensive compared to many other blushes that are on the market, so I would be a little interested in buying another shade of these. And then she also has a highlighter stick, and so this is one of those glassy type of highlighter sticks that I have come to really like and that I do think looks kind of youthful on me. And so there are two different shades, and one of them has kind of a golden look to it, and the one that I have is a pearl, which is just a kind of a neutral champagne color. And I think that this has actually been really appealing for me, and I have liked it a lot. And so it just does provide a lot of natural moisture to the skin. And so I think of it as kind of a substitute for the Jones Road Miracle Balms. And so those do have a lot of scent ingredients in them that do irritate my skin. And so this is sort of a more muted version of that, I think. And because this is not giving all that much coverage, I decided to add a little bit of concealer. So the concealer that I used at the end here was the CeraCreal Face Flex Concealer, and I have found that one to be good all around. And so you can see what you think of that in conjunction with the Victoria Beckham product. And then I put on just a little bit of mascara. So the mascara I've been using recently is the Jane Iredale Lash Fixation Tubing Mascara, which is fairly new, and that is a mascara that I think has performed really well and is not even all that expensive. And then at the very end, I put on a little bit of her eyeliner. And so the eyeliners that Victoria Beckham sells are called the Satin Kajal Eye Pencils. And I just have one of these. I have it in the shade Cocoa. And my experience with these eye pencils is that the one that I have, it was a little bit irritating to my eyes, especially when I first got it. And it also creates kind of an automatic smoky eye. And it does it really, really easily. So it goes on pretty thick. I think that if I wanted to use it more regularly, I should probably think about using it with an eyeliner brush and to apply it with the brush, and then I might be able to get a look that was not quite so smoky looking. But I haven't really worn this all that much because it has irritated my eyes a bit in the past. And I don't feel like it was as irritating this time when I used it. My eyes have been a little bit less irritated recently than they have been in the past. But in general, that is why I haven't purchased another one of these, even though an awful lot of the colors of these do look really, really pretty. And then we have the next video footage, and this one is comparing the Patrick Ta and the Victoria Beckham foundations. And so I am putting the Victoria Beckham foundation drops on one half of my face, and then I am putting the Patrick Ta on the other half of my face. And the Victoria Beckham, again, this is in shade 2, and the Patrick Ta is in shade 7, which is supposed to be like a neutral peach type of a color. And I think if we compare these two without putting down any powder or setting spray, I think that the Victoria Beckham product looks a little bit more shiny than the Patrick Ta just right off the bat. And I don't think it's giving that slightly plumped look that the Patrick Ta product gives. I do think that both of them are giving pretty similar amounts of coverage, which is to say not very much coverage, but that it is light, and in theory you could build it up a bit, but again, these are both such wet foundations that I kind of don't think you would want to build it up very much. And the Patrick Ta one has 3 forms of hyaluronic acid as the main hydrating ingredient in it, and so the Victoria Beckham one actually doesn't have hyaluronic acid in it at all. That one has more oils in it. And then I am using the Makeup by Mario Surreal Skin setting spray again on both sides of my face. And then I am using the Jones Road Brow Pencil. And so this is a brow pencil that I have been very pleased with. It's one of my very favorite makeup products at all. And the reason for why I think it works so well for me is that there are little fibers in the brow pencil, and so when I draw it on, it gives the look of there being more actual hairs in my brow, and therefore it looks kind of natural rather than drawn on. And I can put it on just in a couple of seconds for each brow. And then I am putting on some of the Polite Society powder. So this is called More Than a Pretty Powder, and I have this in the shade Brightening Petals, so it is kind of a pink powder. And my feeling about this powder is that it does a very, very good job of sucking up any oil that I may have on my face. And so if I put it directly down on my skin, even in the summer, I think that that is a real mistake because it will dry it all out. But I do think if I put even a very small amount of it on top of an oily foundation, that it does a very good job of bringing it into control very quickly. And I think that the main ingredient that does that may be the hydroxyapatite in this. And in any case, this does not have any talc in it, and so I am kind of happy about that because talc is making me a little bit nervous, especially when it is in loose powder form. And so again, I'm just using a very, very small amount of this powder just to make sure that it doesn't suck up too much of the oil and just to take away the shine in the places that I think are problematic. And then I'm using an older product, and this is called the Victoria Beckham Bronzing Brick. And this is in the shade 1, and this is a product that was released, I think, in 2018 when Victoria Beckham first came on the market, and so it has been around for a while. I really like the packaging for this. It's in packaging that is glass and metal, and so that is quite lovely. But in terms of the formula, I do think that it is getting a little bit dated in how it performs. I don't think that it's not that I can't make it work, and I don't feel like it's been irritating for my skin, but I don't feel like I am liking this formula nearly as much as some of the other powders that I have. This powder has two different shades in here, so the lighter shade is supposed to be an overall bronzer that makes your skin look a little bit more tanned, and then the darker shade is supposed to be for contouring. So I tried to use that a little bit like that on my skin, but again, I'm not all that crazy about contouring my face. And in addition, I used a little bit of this on my eyes just as kind of a little base for the other eyeshadow that I'm going to use. And then again, I put on a little bit of the Cheeky Posh blush in the shade Playground, and I do like that blush quite a bit, and so I'm a little bit interested in getting another shade of that now that I've gone back and played with this a bit. And then for this, I used another shade of Lid Luster, and that is in the shade called Midnight. And so this is kind of a bright blue color, and I used a little bit of this just on my eyelids as an eyeshadow, and then I used it a little bit more heavily as an eyeliner with an eyeliner brush, and I think that that works pretty well with this. I think that these lid lusters, they're kind of nice. I haven't gotten them out and tried to use them for a while, and I do feel like when I try to put them on as eyeshadows that they do tend to be a little bit patchy, but that in general I kind of like the way that they look. And I am wearing another one today, and that one is called Tea Rose. And again, I think that that's a very pretty and kind of muted color, and so you can take a look at that. And then I have the same lip pencil as before. This is shade 3, and then I have another shade of the lipstick, the Posh lipstick, and that is in the shade called Pout, which is kind of a peachy pink, and I do kind of like that shade as well. And I used that on my lips, and then I put a little bit on my cheeks as a blush because I felt like the Playground in itself was a little bit on the neutral side, especially when I had the eyeshadow being so much more dramatic. And although most of Victoria Beckham's lip products tend to be on the more muted side, she does make a bright red lip pencil and a bright red lipstick. And so the bright red lip pencil is called Red, and the lipstick is called Pop. And both of these are what I think of as being a cherry red, so they are pretty much on the neutral side. They're not too cool and they're not too warm. And although both of these are bright, I feel like they are not too bright for me to wear and that they do not overwhelm my low contrast complexion. And so when it comes to red lip products, these are among my favorites. And in the video footage, I did put a little bit of a lip gloss over the top of that lipstick. And the lip gloss that I chose was one that is by Sarah Creel. And this is in the No Further Questions lip line. And the shade that I have here is After Hours, which does have a reddish tone to it. And then I used a little bit of that Jane Iredale tubing mascara again. And so in general, I don't feel like the two sides really look too much different from one another. I think that if I were going to choose, I would probably say that the Patrick Ta one was looking better, but in general, I feel like both in person and in the camera, I think that both of the sides are looking fairly similar to one another, and these foundations are performing fairly similar to one another in terms of my experiences wearing them so far. And so it will be interesting to compare them when it gets to be winter, because I think that that may be when the skincare benefits will really shine. And so now let's talk briefly about some of the other Victoria Beckham products that I have tried and about my experiences with them. And so the first product was another collaboration between Augustinus Bader and Victoria Beckham. And this is called the Concealer Pen, I think. And the idea of this one is that the foundation comes out when you click the bottom of this. It comes out from this little brush, and you can brush it onto your skin. And so this has 3 peptides in it. So it has the oligopeptide 177, and then it has the other peptide that is also in the foundation. And then it has a third peptide that is called acetylhexapeptide 8. And then it also has some cocoa butter and prickly pear stem extract. And so I don't feel like this was irritating to my skin, but I do feel like the scent of this product was really irritating to me, and it quickly started to give me headaches. And so the scent ingredient in this is called ethylene brosylate, and this is a musk smell that was invented by DuPont in the 1940s. And so I do think that that is a really strong and unpleasant scent for me. Not everyone seems to even notice it or object to it, but for me it definitely was a problem. And so I let Victoria Beckham know about that, and I just informed them that it had given me headaches, and they just immediately gave me my money back. But I am a little bit thought that was unfortunate that they put that scent in there, because I think it would have been a nice product and that I would have gotten some good use out of it. I do think, however, that it's very, very expensive on a cost per milliliter basis, and so it's a little bit hard to justify purchasing it for that, because I think that you would have to be buying it over and over again, and that would be a little bit more than I would be willing to spend, I think, on a regular basis just to get a concealer. Augustinus Bader has a line of tinted lip balms, and I do like those very, very much. And they do have that oligopeptide 177 in them. And I do think that in terms of making my lips look a little bit more plump and a little bit more healthy and keeping my lipstick from running off the edges of my lipsticks, that all of those things have been really helped by those lip balms. And so there's a plain colored clear one, and then there's 3 that have color in them, and I think that all of those have been very nice for me. And even though those are pricey, I think that those have been worth the price for me. Now, there are other lip balms, like the one from Drunk Elephant, that may have some peptides in them also, and I like those as well. But I think I especially like those Augustinus Bader ones, and that I have gotten good results from them. And I have a whole bunch of their eyeshadow sticks, and I think that I have liked these quite a lot. They do set down very quickly, and so if you're going to blend them, then I do think that you should be working with them really fast. I had forgotten about that when I did this most recent eye look, but in general, I do like these quite a lot, and they do have a lot of good shades here. One thing that I will say about them is that they are a little finicky. And I've received some of them that have been broken right off the bat, and I've had some of them that have broken after I've had them for a while, and so I think that they're not perfect, but in terms of how they perform and in terms of the looks that I get from them, I do really like them, and I just didn't demonstrate them very much in this video because I have talked about them so much in other videos, but I'm thinking I would like to do an eyeshadow stick video at some point soon, and so I will talk about these more in that video. And then another stick product that they have that's a little bit like the eyeshadow sticks is their contour stick. And so Victoria Beckham created this to contour her nose. So it's a really narrow stick, and so it works really well if you want to do a very thin line on your cheekbones or to do it on your nose. And this shade that I have, which I think is called Travertine, this is a really kind of a mellow shade, and so even though I'm not much of a person that likes contour, I think that I can make this one work if I'm going to use any kind of contour at all. This one is about as good as anything. And sometimes when I do this, people tell me they like it the way that it looks when I contour my face. But in general, I feel like as I've gotten older that it's become really necessary because my skin is becoming more gaunt on my face to begin with. And then another product that Victoria Beckham introduced earlier this year are these little eyeshadow palettes that have powder eyeshadow. And so a lot of these look really bright to me or really dark, and that they seem like they would really only be appropriate for evening use. I do think that this shade, which is the one with the greens in it, that this one has actually been okay for me, even for day use. It is a little bit more dramatic than a lot of the eyeshadows that I have, but it has this taupe color in it that allows you to easily dull it down a little bit. And so I have really liked this shade, but I haven't really felt like it was necessary for me to try any of the other ones that she is offering because I think that they would create a much more dramatic, smoky type of a look. And she has a gel cleanser and an oil cleanser that was released, I think, maybe earlier this year. And I have liked both of those products. They are really expensive, so they're $70 each. And so most people are not going to be willing to spend that much money for a cleanser. I think the oil cleanser has very high quality oils in it. I don't know that you need to spend that much money for a cleanser, but it certainly works perfectly fine as an oil cleanser. And the gel cleanser I actually do really like because it is really mild. It doesn't have anything in it that has been irritating to my skin. And it does just have a little bit of, I think, lactic acid in it. And so it is just a little bit exfoliating in terms of chemical exfoliation, but it's not something that my skin can't tolerate. And so that I might actually buy again. And I haven't been using it very often, like maybe once a week at most. But I think that as chemical exfoliants go and as cleansers that are gel-based for my skin go, I think that that one is actually very nice and possibly worth considering and unusual enough that it may be worth that $70. And there are a couple of mascaras. So one of these is called Future Lash, and this is a tubing mascara, and usually I do prefer a tubing mascara, and I think that this performs pretty well, but I did find it to be very slightly irritating to my eyes, and so that made me not very inclined to buy it again. And then the other mascara that they have is called Vast Lash, and this is more of a volumizing mascara. And I think that this has performed well also, and I would agree that it doesn't smudge very much and that it performs pretty easily for me, and that I don't think that it has been irritating. I don't think it's irritated my eyes in the same way that the Future Lash one has, but I tend not to really like lash mascaras that are volumizing, and so although I did use this quite a lot of times, when I first got it, I haven't felt it to be important enough to me to rebuy it again because that's not really the kind of mascara that I tend to like, and because I just do have a lot of mascaras around. Victoria Beckham also does have a line of lip glosses, and I did try one of those out a couple of years ago, and I did really like the way that that looked on my lips, but unfortunately I don't feel like it was all that moisturizing. And in addition, in well under a year after I purchased it and started using it, it did start to feel like it was going rancid. And so I haven't felt it necessary to repurchase that, especially since I think there are a lot of other lip glosses on the market that I think are a lot better that have been released since then. And then there are just a few products that I have not tried. And so the first one of these is the Victoria Beckham and Augustinus Bader Cell Rejuvenating Serum, which is $125 or $210. And so that has 2 fermented ingredients, niacinamide, TFC8, which is the oligopeptide 177, and 2 kinds of hyaluronic acid. So I'm not sure how this would be different than the other skincare products that Augustinus Bader offers. I think it has a few extra ingredients in it, but I wouldn't see any reason not to get that, and I'm sure it would be fine, but I haven't actually sprung for that one yet. So I haven't heard from very many people that have tried it either, so that is another reason that I haven't really gone for it. And there is a lip tint that is called the Bitten Lip Tint for $38, and that one has sorbitol in it, and I was kind of turned off by that concept because someone said that the taste of it was like licking the back of an envelope. But in addition, I haven't really heard all that many good things about it, so I've just never picked that one up. And there is an instant brightening waterline pencil that is supposed to be kind of a beige color that will make your eyes supposedly pop a little bit. And I tend not to like to put pencils in my waterline, so I've skipped that one. And there is a Posh Balm, and these were like lipsticks that have a lot of moisture in them. And they are $32. They're 5 shades. They were released, I think, last year maybe. And they have cottonseed oil in them, and my feeling about cottonseed is that it almost always is contaminated with glyphosate and other agricultural chemicals. And really, I feel like all of the products that I use that have cottonseed oil in them tend to be irritating for me. And so I just skipped that one. And then the last one is called Color Wash, and it is a blush. So it's like a stain type of a blush, and there are 3 shades. And so I think that there's supposed to be like the old Daniel Sandler watercolor blushes, which I have not tried. And they're $46, so I thought that that was quite expensive. And so I haven't purchased it yet, but I think that the main reason that I'm a little skeptical about it is because it is staining, and because it looks like, even though it comes in a dropper, and even though I guess you could drop it right on your face, I would be a little bit worried about doing that. And I think I would be more comfortable if I put it on my hand and then put it on the back of my cheek, which is how I would usually do it. But in this case, I feel like I am hearing that the blush will stain the back of my hand, and then I'll have to use a special makeup remover to remove it, or I will have to have a special palette in the bathroom. And all of this sounds a little bit on the complex side, and so that has been demotivating for me in terms of buying it. But I think maybe if this comes to Blue Mercury, and then Blue Mercury has a sale where I can get 20% off, if I spend a certain amount, then maybe that would be a good purchase to make with regard to that Blue Mercury sale. But so far, I just feel like $46 is so expensive that unless I really feel like I'm going to use a product, that makes me not want to use it. So my final thoughts about all of these, I think that with regard to the complexion drops, I don't think it's a bad product, and I am kind of looking forward to using it over the winter to see if that makes a difference in terms of my skin quality and in terms of being able to use a foundation that works well for me over the winter. But in general, I also kind of feel like the coverage is so light that it is a little bit of expense and a little bit of trouble to put this on if it's not going to really make that much difference. And I have more felt like using the Patrick Poff foundation. In general, also, I think that although there may or may not be enough of the oligopeptide 177 in the product to make a difference, I think that it would be just as easy to get some of the Rich Cream or some other product from Augustinus Bader and just use that, and that would maybe not be any less expensive. But on the other hand, I think that simplifying my routine rather than using products that, multiple different products that do the same thing, that seems to be something that I'm moving more towards. But I don't dislike it, and I think that it's a product that I want to continue to experiment with a bit more, and then I'll report back again later on after I've tried it out some more. And it's possible that I may grow to like it enough that it will end up in my best products of the year, so we will just have to see. In terms of the Victoria Beckham products in general, there are some of these that I think have been holding up really well. This is an older line, and most of these products have not been reformulated since the company was introduced. So I do think that the lip liners and the Posh lipsticks, I think that those are both really excellent still. And so I would actually be a little bit interested in getting more colors of that lipstick. And I think that the highlighter stick is very nice. I think that the gel cleanser is very nice, and that the eyeshadow sticks are really good. And I do like the one shade of the eye wardrobe that I have. And the blush sticks are very nice, and I think that compared to many of the other blush sticks that are on the marketplace, the fact that these last well on the cheeks is a good thing. And then the other products, as I say, some of those are okay, but I haven't been as enthusiastic about them. But one thing that I will say is that if I compare the prices of these products to some of the other products that are on the market, they used to seem like they were really expensive, and I don't feel like their prices have all gone up that much. And so some of these older products, they're not necessarily as standout as they used to be, but on the other hand, they're not all that expensive compared to other things either. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of the video. And if you have tried any Victoria Beckham products in the past, then please let me know what your experiences have been. Or if any of these products interest you, then let me know what you think of that. And in addition, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then I hope you will go ahead and do that. And if you like this video, then I hope you will hit like, because supposedly that helps the algorithm. And Coco and I do love you very much, and so thank you very much for watching. Goodbye. Ba-da-ba-da-da-bum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.